Right, so I'm explaining the quiz 1. Okay, I show the sentence. Okay, keep following it. Okay. John knew the answer. You get it? Right? And then we can see another sentence. John knew the answer was wrong. Right? John knew the answer. And then John knew the answer was wrong. So the question is, what is it? So John knew the answer. Yesterday we studied about we are processing the language in a serial way, right? So when you read up to John knew the answer, you understand it. The answer means, yeah. So it looks like John has a correct answer, right? John knew the answer. But when they say John knew the answer was wrong, which means answer was wrong. John doesn't know the answer, right? In a serial approaching in language processing is called what? Is the first question. Okay, the sentence John knew the answer was wrong is what? What is called it? Okay, when you read up to that point, John knew the answer, but was wrong means it changed the whole meaning of the sentence, right? So garden pass or sentence used to demonstrate the minimal attachment strategy, a sentence with temporal ambiguity, and D is or above. So put the code 51 for your cricket. Get it? Okay, I will start time ticking. Quite good, 90%. Okay, number 1 is the answer. The garden pass model. Okay? So we process the language in serial way, right? It's not interactive way. Okay, that is one of the evidence. When you read the first sentence, it looks like John knows the answer. But when you read the rest of part of the sentence, you know that John doesn't know the answer. The answer was incorrect. Okay, that is called the garden pass model. I explained yesterday with other example. So second question is more tempting and more challenging. Okay. One of the interesting part of language perception is vocabulary, right? So we recognize vocabulary. Some of the words can easily recognizable. Some of them aren't, right? Why that happens? So for example, this one is an example of which of the following item would be recognized quickly, right? Shortest time, assuming then your experimental procedure controlled adequately for guessing, which means your controlled environment, okay, totally controlled environment. So each one of it can be easily recognizable. The meaning. Easy question, pretty much easy. And then that was probably called the word superiority effect, which we learned in chapter 5. Word superiority. Remember that? Word, when you see the word that has some meaning, so that can strengthen our recognition power, the word superiority effect. Or yesterday, frequency and word length is relevant to recognizing word, such as that is easy to recognizable than this one. Reason is this one is more frequent word and shorter word. This one is not much frequently being used, as well as a longer word, right? Yeah. Because that has a meaning, okay? And doesn't have any meaning, see? Probably you are wondering about and or benches, which one is much easier to recognize. But as YJ said, and doesn't have any particular meaning, but bench has a meaning, as well as frequently being used rather than single n. So that's why when you do some experiment with the 4 alternatives, you probably see bench is much easily recognizable. Oh, okay. Last question is tricky. Okay. Right. I played 3 sound yesterday with a sentence, right? So, and then copying sound, okay? In a copying sound, within a copying sound, people can recognize the word, right? As we identified yesterday. The question is, when you proofread a paper, we sometimes perceive letters that are not there, thereby failing to detect spelling errors on the pages, which means even though there are spelling errors or typos, you can ignore it to capture the right word. Okay, you can understand it even though there are typos, right? So a similar phenomena, perceiving aspect of the stimulus that are not actually present, has been documented in hearing. Yesterday we exercised it. The phenomena is called what? Word frequency effect, or the verbal transformation effect, or the phonemic restoration effect. Phonemic. Yeah. And blasted, what did you say? Blasted perceiver effect, okay? The phoneme, morpheme, yeah, that is a word, sound. Okay. Get it? Understand the question? So we have a similar effect, okay? Even though you have typos in the newspaper, you can understand it. We exercised yesterday, there are some missing sound we can easily capture by the context given. The eel example. It is found eel in the bank or in the shoe, something. Get it? Understand? Everyone? Yeah. Okay. Answer is phonemic restoration effect. It was, yesterday example was this one. Okay. It was found that blah blah eel in the car. When you hear the coughing sound in here, you can catch up with hill because of this one. When you see coughing sound like that in the shoe, you put this one with hill. Likewise, phonemic is restored when you hear the other context. Okay? So that is called phonemic restoration effect. So that is 3 main things you have to keep in mind when you design the information. So now we can move on to today's lecture, the rest of the part, chapter 12. Thank you. Right. So what we haven't done yet is how we can analyze the language, right? So when you analyze the language, you see what kinds of cognitive process is being used or employed in the language structure. So first job, many of the linguists as well as the cognitive psychologists have studied about the structure of the language. Okay, structure of the language. So one of the main structural information in language is called phrase structure. We learned some of the syntax from very early stage in like a middle school or primary school. Most of the study done this one is based on English country, so the education system or language structure is quite different with us. So I'm trying to explain everything based on English, because all the study is about English. But anyway, so the important thing about, we have to structuring the language in particular phrase. Likewise, this one. Okay, the brave dog is saved the drowning child. That is full sentence. Okay, when you see this sentence, okay, your cognitive process will structuring this sentence. Likewise, this one is noun phrase. Right? Noun. In Korean, 명사절. Noun phrase. Okay. This one, verb phrase, right? Verb phrase. And then, when you see the noun phrase, the Okay, something like this way. The first one is, second one is, third one is, okay, top-down processing. That is article. That is adjective. Yep, adjective. The noun, right? Okay, in here, you have to be very careful. This one is total, the verbal phrase, but this one is also have a secondary level. Okay, this one is verb, okay, proper verb, and this one is another noun clause, noun phrase. In this noun phrase, first one is article, okay, and adjective, and noun, right? So that is how the linguist specialize or categorize all the sentence in particular phrase structure analysis. This one is really useful for artificial intelligence. When you design the intelligence, in chapter 5 and chapter 6, we know the how to represent the knowledge, right? So we borrow the concept from the linguist, these kinds of things, to make a certain intelligence or knowledge. Okay, so we are communicating each other, helping each other, linguist and AI, cognitive psychologist, computer scientist, using the same format. This one is called the phrase analysis. Okay, this one is a very simple example. So that's why, so this one is our textbook says, the brave dog saved the downy children, has this kind of phrasal, right, analysis. But interesting part of the new sentence, why the phrase analysis is important can be seen from this example. Why? So this one is a ludicrous one, okay, very boring long job. But I mean, why that is important can be seen from this sentence. They are cooking apples. Okay? That sentence has two meanings. First meaning, cook apple. Somebody, the people, cooking apple. And second meaning is, the things are cooking apple. The apple is for cooking. Okay? The apple is for cooking. So very special, it's not expensive one. Cooking apple is very cheaper one, the ugly stuff. So this one can be separated in two different ways. Okay, noun form, noun phrase. And verb phrase. Okay, and here, it can be real verb. Okay. Okay, this one is verb, okay. Okay, when you see this way, okay, this one is noun. As adjective, no? If you see cooking as adjective, which means they are cooking apple, apple for cooking. If you see cooking as adjective, okay, this one is the apple for cooking. Right? If you see, this one is not the adjective as a whole verb. Huh? So they are cooking apple. Okay? So depending on what word you want to see as a particular phrase, so you can see the different meanings. You get it? Okay? When you see this one, like verb, okay, you see this one is they are cooking apples. People cooking apple. But if you see this one is adjective, that is apple for cooking. Get it, Guillaume? Okay. Right. So this kind of phrasal structure analysis of this one, okay, that is full format of our textbook says, if you see this one as auxiliary verb, okay, and this one is adjective, so you can see apple for cooking. This one is people are cooking apples. Okay, so that is benefit. That is beauty about appraisal analysis. That's why many of the linguistic studies are starting from this study, starting from this analysis to see all the natural language. Korean has the same format. Okay, Portuguese, English has a similar format. So that's why I start with this example. The point is, this one is a written format, right? The cooking apple, they are cooking apple is written format, okay, printed one. But if we can hear something, sound or vocal information, how we can understand two different meanings. They are cooking apples, so it can be interpreted in two different ways. But in the verbal situation, how can we recognize which meaning? In many cases, our techniques is doing this. We give a pause. Okay? They are cooking apple. Means this apple for cooking. Okay? But when you see they are cooking apple, means people cooking apple. So that's why your English intonation and when do you need to stop is important. Otherwise, in Korean, very special Korean is 아버지 가방에 들어가신다. That's it, right? So that is why you have to put the period or pause in a right position. Okay? They are cooking apple means these apples for cooking. This one is they are cooking apple means okay, peoples are cooking apples. So when do you need a pause? You don't get it. So when you have pause, like they are, you have a short break, right? They are cooking apple, which means, yeah, but I mean, depending on your verbal pause, people can understand that is all. They are cooking apple. Means the apple is for cooking, adjective one. This one is used adjective, but when you have pause in here, because this one is whole verb, the verb phrase, so they just put them together like, they are cooking apple. People are cooking apple. Okay? This one is verb. Oh, it's a different meaning. Okay, this one is apple for cooking. Apple for cooking. They are apple for cooking. Huh? They're apple, okay? For cooking. But this one is they are cooking, real cooking. Like boiling or something. Say why the they are cooking apple has a different meaning. Depending on when do you need pause. Likewise, all the syntactic analysis and vocal analysis by the many of the linguists identified, right? We are speaking in semantic unit. The point is this one. When you read this one, the young woman is reading the book in the house, okay? So they observing many of the native speakers, how they speak this sentence. What do you guess? How they speak it? When do you need pause? When do you need pause? We need two pauses, okay? It's not a rule, but many of the native speakers have two pauses in here. The young woman is reading the book in the house, right? The reason why people read like that is this one is semantically meaningful unit. Like that. And in the house. That's why when you read this sentence in proper way, so you need particular pauses. Like the young woman is reading the book in the house, you can't read it like that. It's very unusual speaking. Right? So that's why. So you need a particular position, the pause, like our Korean speaking is the same wise. So you have to choose best possible unit. When you apply this semantic unit in here, the point is this one. This one is one semantic meaning, cooking apple. Okay? And this one is, when you have pause, this are cooking is the one semantic unit, depending on when you need to pause. Right? So that is pause in speaking is important. Right. Get it? Yep. Okay. Let's go. Yep. Right. This one is the same topic what we had yesterday. Why the human language is so special. The human language is so different. It's our textbook summarized in 3 topics, 3 themes. The first theme is we can make semantically and arbitrarily unique infinite ways. Okay? Well, dog or animals or bees, okay, bumblebee, cannot make so many sentences or so many different units, but human can make all different types of unit. So yeah, so that's why I want to show the new video clip which I found about Kenji. He can communicate with people. The new experimental outcome might be interesting. So human has not only things.
Have conversations? Is it true that conversations?
So that is Oprah Winfrey show.
This recent issue of time.
Okay, I can just play.
How does this lexigram?
That is lexigram
work?
which the Kenjis communicate.
Talk to Kanzi with this.
Kanzi, come here. Come here. Can you say matata?
Matata.
Matata. Matata is Kanzi's mother. All I have to say is the word, and Kanzi can find it. Can you show me ball? Oh, that's right. Show me egg. Egg.
Yeah, hang on. So I have to explain some of the background about Kenji. We just saw the Kenji's example yesterday, but Kenji is very special. The bonobo, it looks like chimpanzee. But this one is a side effect by the Kenji's mom's experiment. Okay, Kenji was offspring of Kenji's mom, right? I don't know the exact name of Oprah or something, Oprah or something. But when they do experiment, okay, the Kenji's mom, the Kenji is observing how their mom is working with the researcher. Actually, the researcher never taught any language to Kenji, right? They never teach any language. But only Kenji is observing how mom and researchers are working together. He learned something. Okay, and after mom's dead, Kenji is the main focus of this experiment about this one. Okay, all the primate, like a chimpanzee and like a bonobo or orangutan, is we can teach them. Some of the experimental I understand, many of the experimental understanding says we can teach around 200 words for every primate, but they can't speak because their vocal system is quite different with us. That's why they use the lexigram like this one, right? They can't speak it, okay? So the point is about Kenji's following experiment is how Kenji developed language skill. Huh? The final outcome say when he's 5 years old at that time, he can speak around 2 years old, the children's speaking, the language level, right? So that's the major outcome. And then from this experiment, they found that humans' language processing, okay, we can understand it based on this experiment. So first experiment is how he learned the lexigram to communicate. This one is, we can do with the primate, this kind of stuff.
Yes, he knows several thousand on his keyboard.
But the important thing is he can remember 700 or 800 words as well as he can make a sentence. The first research outcome, so chimpanzee cannot make a sentence, but he can make it.
These words.
The same way that I did with my son. I just talked to Kanzi like you see me talking now. He just was around me and learned it like a child.
That is a video clip.
Kanzi, would you sit up? Please sit up.
And this one is the same with how the lexigram is working with the Kenjis, but this one is sentence processing. So he's masking her face.
You cut the onions with your knife.
Uh-oh.
That's very good. Thank you. Could you put some salt on your ball? Well, that's a good job. That's very nice. Thank you. Kanzi, can you put the pine needles in the refrigerator? Good job. Thank you. Hansi, are you listening? Could you put some salt in the water? Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Could you listen again? Okay. Hansi, could you pour a little Coke in the water? Could you pour some Coke in the water? Thank you. That's enough. You can, okay. Hansi, pour the Perrier water in the jelly. Thank you. That's good. That's good. You see the TV set? Could you take the TV outdoors? Could you carry the television outdoors, please? Thank you.
So the second experiment is done when he learned about language or vocabulary in the first couple of sessions, and then he tried to make a sentence to communicate with the researcher. So that's why we are not unique people, unique species who can talk or communicate. So other species like bumblebee, dogs, dolphins, they can do it, but ours is somewhat special. Okay, somewhat special. Likewise, okay, we have meaning is arbitrary way. So depending on where you are, depending on what situation you want, we can generate sentence. Of course, kanji make a limited number of new sentences, but we are pretty much abundant, right? It's simple, okay? And then human language is communicate over time and distance. Of course, bumblebee can do it. You know bumblebee? When they found some of the important nectars or some important, the critical mass of the food, the bumblebee is coming back to the nest and then they are dancing it, right? You never know? The bumblebee, bee, transformer, bumblebee. I'm not good at draw, but it's like bee, okay? Okay. It doesn't look like bee, cockroach, okay? So they are dancing it, depending on when they found some of the food in here, okay? When they fly back from the food source, they are dancing. So that when they have a food distance, the distance to the food is larger, they're dancing the bigger way. Right? Likewise, so we are not only things use the displacement time and space, but bumblebee only can do very 2 or 3 different types of language. But we can make very different ways of the time and place replacement over like this one. So that is unique one, many linguistics identify. This one is important thing, discreteness. So when you see the phrasal structure analysis, we can discretize the sentence. We can chop it, right? So depending on your chop it, you can just swap around, play around with this chopped word to make a new sentence, right? Human language contains discrete unit, subject, verb, object, noun, adjective, whole different things, so that we can discretize and then put them together to make a sentence. So the element of the human language can be combined into an almost infinite number of phrase structure. So that is what the human language is distinctive from others. Okay. This one is another thing from our textbook. Okay, like this one. Primate, like chimpanzee, have been taught sign language and other such non-vocal language with modest success, but we can't see kanji's success likewise, because kanji can understand the sentence, communicate with us, interact with us, and he can make even new sentence with the lexigram, right? So that is why the kanji's experiment is so special. But no other species generally, spontaneously use a communication system like a human being. KG. Okay. From that point is pretty much a linguistic perspective comes up Steve Pinker. Probably you never read the books about language instinct. Steve Pinker. I read it a couple of years ago. The major point, the main point about Steve Pinker's book is very similar with Chomsky. Say like instinct. Okay, language is instinct. Okay, so language is wired into our human brain through evolution. Likewise, bird singing it, right? Dog is barking it, right? Likewise, human is speaking and talking, and of course, listening, right? So that is wired in our brain. Okay, so that's what Steve Pinker say. His book title is called Language Instinct. Just like birds are born with the ability to learn songs of their species. Of course, we can copy it. We can copy bird of song, the songs of bird. But that is not the major communication what we can do with the bird. We just copy it, imitating it. We can't communicate with the song, the bird. Right? So the same as Chomsky, the same idea, language instinct or language acquisition unit is the same meaning with Chomsky. And that's why Kanji's did is similar what we copied the song of the bird. Some people claim that what Kanji did is just copied it, imitated it. Right? But I mean, some of the researcher does not agree with this idea. Kanji is very special because he can talk and interact with us depending on the situation. So that is debatable at this time. So whether Kanji's one is just copy of the word or copy of the sentence or really something else. Anyway, so that is kind of Steve Pinker's work must be described. So from now on, some of the major issue comes up with how the language and cognitive psychology is linked. Okay? The title is The Relationship Between Language and Thought is the middle of our chapter 12, is the major part of chapter 12. Why such a connection between language and human? Why that is so much important? Why we have to study language and cognitive process? As I said, Steve Pinker in Language Instinct and Chomsky's, they also say, they keep talking about language is different thing. Okay, humans have a special genetic endowment that enable them to learn language is that their perspective. We evolved. The language is nothing to do with the cognitive process. And the other people say language is depending on your IQ or cognitive process. That is two different things. It's language is already in here, and the other one is depending on your cognitive power, you can learn new language. That is two different approach. Which one is right? Many of people now is going for this one. But up to 1990s, still Pinker and Chomsky's idea is still working in many situations. But nowadays, many people is leaning toward the second opinion. Probably we can learn language or comprehension. Okay, we can language comprehension depending on your general cognitive power. So that's why we study these two things in today's lecture. Okay, so there are three possibilities when we take this one. When we take this one, we can't do much at this time because that is more about biological study. Okay? But when you take the second opinion about cognitive power, we can have three options. So language depends on thought, or thought depends on language, or they are two different things. Okay, language depends on thought, or thought depends on language. What does that mean? Language depends on thought. Too difficult for early in the morning? Language depends on thought. Which means Korean people and English people has a different thought because their language are different. Is it? Yeah, it could be culture, but culture is not included in linguistics as yet. I mean, that is a future world. Or this second one is thought depends on language. Or totally independent one. Find a specific example. First one. So language depends on thought, right? We can start from this one. Language depends on thought. Right. The idea about language depends on thought is starting from behaviorism. The early psychology in 1930 and 40 is John Watson and Skinner. Okay, these two guys mentioned that when you speak, okay, just this kind of process. When you think, we speak. A simple approach. The Watson, Skinner say, when we think, just say it. Okay, think and speak is identical. That's the Watson and Skinner's approach. When you think, you speak it. See? I'm talking right now, isn't it? So that's why I'm thinking at the same time with the speaking. That's the what Watson and Skinner's mentioned. So language depends on thought. Okay? Right? You get it? Something. So based on this one, Simon and Newell identified think aloud method. The one of the important technique in human understanding, like make them talk, keep talking it, right? That is only way we can understand their cognitive process. Okay? That's why think and speak is behavioralism. Okay? So that is language dependent thought. But as you know, this one is pretty much awkward situation. We found many other negative evidence, okay, adversarial evidence that is not true. Sometimes we can speak before we thought. I do normally. I speak first and then think. You probably know I'm speaking too much, right? But without any thought. But some people is think but not speak. Only think and not speak, right? So this idea is pretty much gone at this time. Okay. So we need a new theory called this one. European hypothesis. Wolf is Wolf. Okay. I can't pronounce clearly. Wolf is the name of a person. Is a chemist. It's not a cognitive psychologist. So that's why his hypothesis is linguistic determinism. He didn't any experiment. He didn't do anything or empirical study. Only what he did was idea. The structure of language, like English, the structure of English language strongly influenced the way we think in English people. Okay, likewise, Eskimos. There are heaps of words for snow. Korean, we have heaps of color coding. We have heaps of color coding name. Right. In Korean, sorry, I have to speak in Korean. Some of the words in Korean. 까무스레하다. 뭐 많지? 거무잡잡하다. 불구스레하다. 그치? But in English it's only reddish or red something. Okay? Of course, English has a noun, much nouns than us. Right? There are chair, stool, sofa. We all call this one is 의자, right? In Korean, normally, sofa. But I mean, English word, there is heaps of different types of chairs, stool or something else. Like Filipinos, they have 92 words for rice. Filipinos, because they have rice, the cultivating country. Some of the country or native people have only 2 colors. So Wolfian is, this guy, Wolf, is trying to identify probably native Indian in America. They have different mental structure with us. with the normal American people. That is their hypothesis. Okay? That is their hypothesis. So they say it's much weaker than behavioralism. So that's why it's another theory is done by language depends on thought. Wolffian. So another terms, linguistic determinism. Right. So this one is a little bit more information. Different language emphasize different aspect of the world. So likewise, Filipino, they have many words for the rice, so which means they have probably some strong mental structure of the rice. Eskimos, they probably have a quite good structure, mental structure of snow, because they have many words. Like Korean has many adjectives, that's why more emotional rather than logical. So whether we have to believe it or not is the second issue, but researchers are talking about, there might be. There might be. Depending on the language, their mental structure might be different. Which means English, French, okay, German, Korean might be different mental structure. Whether that is possible. Okay? So that's why the Wolffian hypothesis is important. So this hypothesis emphasis in a language must have a great influence on the way that speakers that language think about the world around them. But point is, it is really hard to prove the Wolffian hypothesis. It's very tricky. It's very, very difficult. That's why many of the studies is talking about starting with the vocabulary level. How can we prove the linguistic determinism? So they found Eskimo has many words for snow. Arabic language have many ways for naming camel. The Philippine, one of the Philippine race, the reason is 92 different names of rice. But whether these different numbers of the vocabulary is determine our thought, that is question. Some of the country has many words, like English has many verb, we don't have it. So that is important to determine whether our mental structure is weaker than American. So that's why the psychologists, cognitive psychologists, are wondering about whether linguistic determinism is right or wrong. That is really hard. Okay? So first test was this one. So one of the New Guinea, some of the tribe is called Dani. Okay? They can recognize only two colors, black and white. Okay? Of course, English people, yesterday I mentioned the 11 colors, right? Normally 11 focal colors we can identify, right? 11 versus 2. So the question is, can people who lack word for certain color still perceive them? Which means whether Dani people can see pink or purple or blue. They can see it because they don't have any language. They don't have any word for pink or something. Okay, so first experiment was done. 1954, okay. Oh, yes, English people has a really strong recognition power of the different colors than Dani people. From this one, we can say, the Wolffian hypothesis is proved. Right? So English people, because they have 11 colors named, so they are better than the Dani people. The point is this special cognitive ability for identifying the colors developed because English speakers have a special word for colors? The idea is this one. English people has a special color name, that's why they are better to recognize color, or just they have a special power to identify the color because of the name or because of their cognitive power. If that comes from cognitive power, we can say language depends on thought. Really hard, isn't it? But second experiment has somewhat different outcomes. Same people, Dani people, in 1973, experimental procedure is slightly different. How did they do it? So they show colors for 5 seconds. okay, any colors for 5 seconds, and then they have to pick up the color you have just seen out of 160 color code. They saw any color, like pink, for 5 seconds, and then they have to find this color, what you have seen out of 160. From this experiment, this Roche's experiment say there's no difference. Even though Dani people only can have 2 names of the colors, they can pick up the same color what they seen from this 160 cubes. So which means Ophian hypothesis is not true. Language is not depending on thought. So their explanation is this one. Probably the color perception is nothing to do with the thought. It's more about the visual system. Okay? So, visual information processing. Okay? And working memory, right? And long-term memory. Of course, in here is attention. Right? So Ophian's experiment with Dani people is only talking about this one. Around this one. Okay, that's why we are not talking about the language itself. Right? So Roche's experiment and previous experiment is all talking about the visual system physiology. Right? That's why this kind of experiment is nothing to do with some language processing. So that is another approach. So the latest approach is happening. In 2000, the new outcome comes up. Okay, about the same people, somewhat different people, but they have a similar issue. The couple of color coding they only can recognize, the different race, different tribes. The point about this experiment was this one. In the previous experiment, even Dani people can recognize all different colors, but this experiment was this one. Color boundary, pink and yellow. And red, and yellow and green, right? Some of the colors overlapped, isn't it? Very close to each other. Like red, pink is pretty much similar in terms of RGB or in terms of HSG. So the English people, okay, has so many different color, and this Berimo has only 2 color perception in a language. Okay, and then their test was whether the participant can separate the colors, whether they can set up the boundary of each colors. Experimental outcome say, very interesting. Okay, the red one, the black one, it says that is number of trial of criteria. So this one, yellow, green. Because English people have a yellow and green color coding, they can separate easily because English people has it. Okay? But look at this one, this line, the Berimo, they take 4 times. So the learning time is doubled because they don't have any color coding like this one. So it sounds like, depending on your name of colors, our mental process is somewhat different to classify the colors. Okay, this one is pink, this one is yellow, this one is green. If you can't see, if your language doesn't have any yellow, you probably cannot classify these colors into particular color domain, color space. So that's why this one is another proof for Ophian hypothesis. The latest outcome say Ophian hypothesis might be right. Okay, my previous one is wrong. My previous one, Ophian hypothesis is not right, but the latest one says, it might be right. Okay, so that is the situation at this time. Okay, that is still working. Okay, that is still working hypothesis. It's not dumped yet. Okay, many of you maybe study the opium hypothesis, you will be a star researcher. Okay? So opium hypothesis, linguistic determinism, and Roche raised the question, but latest outcome says it might be true. So that is my summary. And this one is the first one. The second one is the other way around. Okay, language depends on thought. Okay? A thought depends on the second one. That is second issue. This one is first issue, first approach. That is second approach. Okay, there are heaps of evidence say the thought depends on the language. So it might be true. But the point is this one. This one is my summary. So language structure, thought first, and the language for communication too. Because when you're observing the many of the infant, they have a mental power. When they need some of the food, they are crying. So these kinds of mental power, they have a very complex problem solving. They can do it, but they can't speak it. Right? So from this one, they have a mental power, but later on we learn the language, which means in this certain time, okay, the infant or children is developing some of the tools for desirable for themselves. Okay, so that is, never mind. That is kind of idea. And then this one. The world language, the linguists surveyed the world language, right? And then they summarized the things like that. Subject, object, verb language is 44%, Korean, Japanese. And subject, verb, object language, English, right? Chinese, 35%. Okay? Verb, object, subject is only 2%. Verb, subject, object is 90%. So what is the important thing of these statistics? How can you get something? Can you retrieve one of the information? Subject and object. Which one is first? Subject. 98%. Okay? Only 2% language in worldwide has a subject after object. Isn't it? This one. From this world language, okay? Because our thought is starting from subject and then object. So thought depends on language. That is evidence, the strong evidence of that. 98% of the world language, subject first and then object, which means so language depends on thought. Thought depends on language. The thought first. Okay? And the last one, third possibility is this one. That is why the Chomsky says modularity. Chomsky. Which means is important. Say, where's the red colored? The modularity means that is our mental processing, right? That is our mental processing. What Chomsky say, okay, that is true. I don't want to touch it. Okay, that's true. And then Chomsky say, we have another one. Language. And then they toss somewhere to process it. And then they return some of the things like that. So the problem of language difficulties is the problem of language difficulty is these kinds of paths. If the path is broken, we can speak or we can talk, we have difficulties. But normally, language and mental process is different thing, nothing to do with each other, which means modularity. Language in here, mental power is there, but they are linked. How? The language is passing some of the information to cognitive process and return back to the language structure. That's why the Chomsky proposed language acquisition unit. Okay? Okay, I can read it. So, language and thought is independent. Okay, the modularity proposal of the language is separate component from the cognition. language's communication with other mental processes is limited to passing its product to general cognition and receiving the product of the general cognition. Likewise, what I explained is languages separate things, so they are passing through the balls to the cognitive power and then return back. So problem of language is happens this passing mechanism. From this point, Chomsky proposed two different things. Language acquisition and language comprehension is different things. Chapter 13 is language comprehension. Chapter 12 is language acquisition. Language acquisition is about cognitive process, the mental development. Okay, the year 2, year 5, so every country has a special curriculum. Okay, the standard for the language, like year 5, they have to lead the 홍길동전, something like that. So every country has a certain level of the statutory curriculum. Right, so that is cognitive power. This one is nothing to do with the cognitive power. Practice. That's why your listening comprehension, isn't it? Your TOEFL, the English proficiency test is listen comprehension, not listen acquisition. Okay? So comprehension is less linked with the cognitive power, but language acquisition is with the cognitive development, linked with the cognitive development. Okay? All research paradigm in language has that within that paradigm. So now go to the language acquisition, isn't it? Before we go in that, the modularity evidence is there are many patients, some of the patient doesn't have any mental problem, but they can have some speaking problem. So that means these two things are different things. That is Williams syndrome. Very rare form of the mental retardation, but linguistic has a problem. Okay, likewise. Here. Okay, two domains of research have played a major role in evaluating modularity proposal. First one is language acquisition, second is language comprehension. Okay, that's the Chomsky did. So now language comprehension. From now on, it's simple developmental, cognitive development. Just read it. Okay, I just read it out for you guys. There is many experiments, but we don't need to know all the experimental outcome. So I summarize some of them. First, young infant can discriminate between more phonemes than what we do now. Interesting part. When you're very young infant, they can make many different types of phonemes. Ba, the, something. But adult never do that. Okay? They can develop many phonemes, sound. But adult never do that. Okay? So, Junior, you did it sometimes, right? After drinking, normally binge drinking. Right? So that kind of phonemes can be used in the later on, but why the infant can develop these kinds of many phonemes, sound, but why they discard many of them in later. So that is one of the issue. Okay, so something like when people getting older, they just give up some of the phonemes and they take in more adult language. So that happens around 2 to 12. 2 years to 12. That's why you have to learn English within that time to make a language acquisition quickly. When you're over 12, it's not impossible, but take time. So that is kind of our understanding. So one word stage, around the year 1, okay, first year, we learn only one word. And then up to 18 months, we have 2 word stage. Okay? So that is general, the average. So that depending on what your children can speak, so you can just generally checking your children's cognitive development. If your children cannot speak more than 2 words around at the time is 18, you have to go to the doctor. So there are many other symptoms, okay, many other disease. You have to control very early ages. But after that, is they made the telegraph, the 전보 thing, telegraph, text message things. After that, they make a 3 to 8 word to make a sentence, but they do not use particular word such as the or pronounce. So these kinds of words, they're not much using it. They just simply, I need food. Okay? I need toy. I need the toy. No, they are not speaking. I need a toy. Something like telegraphic ways speaking is up to that point. Right. So that is the example from our textbook. Say like that is 2-word one. So, okay. This one is how they say multi-word utterance. My balloon pop. Doggy bit me, mine boot. Right? Okay. It's not a proper sentence, but they're just learning to link with the 3 sentences. Okay. So children's early speech is incomplete. As I say, they can use only phonemes. Their sentence is not complete, but in the meantime, while they are growing up, they just gave up some of their phonemes to catch up with the adult one. By age 6, most of the language is done. Another experiment in 2010 says the accent and intonation is determined at the age of 4. Okay, so even though you speak English really well, the native people can catch it you from Korean, because you're learning, your first language is Korean, but before 4 years old, you can change the intonation and accent, but after that you can't change it. That is one of the outcomes. Pretty much deterministic, right? So that's why the pronunciation or intonation is not much important for English speaking. Just talking, communication. Okay, that is one of the things. At the age of 6, we master all the language. Okay, so this one, we are gradually approximate adult speech. Initially, we had developed many phoneme, but after that, we just gave up to copy adult. In particular, mom and caregiver. Okay, that's why depend your verbal. Okay, so if your mom is scolding you about why you speak such a harsh word or F word, that sort of thing, you can blame your mom. Because your language comes from your mom. Okay, mostly. Okay, so to explain these kinds of symptoms, computer scientist has developed certain model. One of them is neural network model. This one, Romer-Hartes and McClelland, is our chapter 1. In chapter 1, you have seen this neural network model. PDP model? Never know? Thank you. So that is how the Romer-Hartes and McClelland is the AI people or computer science people is linked with the linguist and AI to study cognitive psychology. So they made with the neural network about these kinds of symptoms. Okay? But it's not much important. So they just keep it. So made this kind of neural network model to predict people's learning of language. Okay. Okay, this one is probably not. Okay, I can skip it. Quality of. Okay. Child receive little or no instruction when acquiring his or her first language, which means many times we trying to teach the language, but they are very reluctant to take it. So, very young ages, they are mastering the language. Listening to others, in particular caregivers, mommy, okay? And then direct instruction is not working. So even though you're trying to teach, like, nobody don't like me. That is wrong sentence in grammar. Nobody likes me is the right sentence, right? So even though you keep teaching at the age around 4 to 5, they never listen to you. They keep talking, nobody don't like me. But this stage is practicing of their sentence. So that's why you just leave them alone. And then they can just catch up with elderly people, or the adult people later on. So that is the thing. This one, critical period of the language acquisition between 2 to 12 to learn new language. That's why the year 6 in Korea, okay? year 6 in Korea. So that's why if you want to send your children to learn English, that time is the best time. 9 to 10. Okay? And under controlled condition, all the children can learn faster because they know some of the grammar. But okay, even adult. Okay, this one is kind of Korean and English people comparison. So likewise, when they arrived in around 12, significantly lower. Okay, these kinds of graph, which means the accent. When you're very early age to move into America, the accent, intonation is pretty much similar with the English people, the American people. But of course, the year 4 is important, right? You have to go before 4 years old to follow American accent. Orange thingy, not orangey. Okay, that is before 4 years old. And then this one is idea about why the 12 is important. This one is, what is that? The word scores, okay? Likewise, 12. But word is kind of memorizing skill, so that is much overlapped. All right, at the age of 10, losing ability to acquire new language to high level of proficiency. So don't give up, but you have to keep studying English. Okay, that is the second issue, language comprehension, not language acquisition. Language acquisition is cognitive power, cognitive development, but language comprehension is your endurance. Okay, so there are age-related difference with success. Okay, just read it. That's the things about all the language thing. And next week is the last topic of our textbook, the language comprehension for the Wednesday. And from Thursday, I guess, I will talk to you about organizational psychology. You don't need to buy the new books. You don't need to buy just enjoy my lecture.